Hi, my name is Justin Beck, and I'm an instructor here at 343 Labs in New York City, and today I'm going to be talking to you about delay. So delay is just another word that we have for echo, and it's a way that we can get things to kind of dance around the stereo field and add cool rhythm to things that otherwise we maybe couldn't do ourselves. So what I'm going to start with is a little ARP that I made using analog. And just by turning on Ableton's stock delay, I'm going to show you how we can transform this completely. So if you're really into progressive music or techno or any kind of genre that specializes in synthesis and electronics, you probably wondered how they get that really lush, shiny sound. And the way that they mainly do that is by using delay. Now the cool thing about delay is that literally what it is doing is it's causing the sound to echo for a certain period of time in a musical rhythm. If we use Ableton's delay though, and other delays for that matter, but particularly Ableton's delay, what we can do is we can have different delay values for the left and the right channel. And what this actually will create is a greater sense of wavering and a greater stereo presence, because our ears are going to become more sensitive to what is happening between the left and the right side. Now, some of you who might be looking at this delay going, what the hell am I looking at? Let me just break it down for you real quick. So these little numbers, all that they stand for is 16th note values. So 1 16th note, 2 16th notes, which is also an eighth note, 3 16th notes, 4 16th notes, which is a quarter note, 5 16th notes, 6 16th notes, 8 16th notes, which is of course a half note, and 16 16th notes rather, which is a whole note. Now what you also can see is that we have left and right. So we can choose to have different delay times. Now if we want to sync them together, which there's definitely a lot of good reasons to do that, we just click this little link button in the middle. And then either of them that I click is going to move. So let's listen to that. Now, all that stuff that you just heard, those weird, trippy kind of shifts and formant noises, are actually one of the coolest things about delay. So what delay is doing, right, is it's allowing us to manipulate time. And so whenever we change a delay value while the delay is occurring, what actually happens is we hear that, and we hear time itself like warping. So basically, we're hearing the effects of time travel in a delay. So check this out. Right, so believe it or not, you can actually use this technique to your advantage. And one of the ways that you can do that is if you take these sync values off, you'll notice that it turns into raw time. So no longer are we actually using note values that sync to our DAW tempo, which is right up here, of course. But what we actually have happening is it's happening in milliseconds. And so we can get really cool, weird effects when we start changing it in milliseconds because it's going to be a more linear response. So check this out. What's also great about this is, as you probably just heard, is that we actually can affect the delay time artifacts after the sound is playing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to keep these set in time. I'm going to turn up the feedback a little bit, and I turn on my automation record. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit record just to demonstrate how you can kind of use this technique to your advantage in a creative way. So if I actually were to now freeze and flatten this track, right, which means to turn it into audio, I now have some of these weird delay artifacts that I could sample. right? And that's actually like a really difficult sound to make from scratch. So you can use turning your little delay time knobs to come up with some weird, trippy effects for your productions that you might have a hard time finding, actually. Now, of course, that's the most extreme usage of a delay, right? Another way that you can use delay, which is very effective, actually, is if you pull up, let's say, a hi-hat sample, and let's just put it in a simple rhythm, and I'm going to do this actually pretty randomly because this is the whole point. I can now drag on a delay, and I can create a rhythm that wasn't there before. And if I just change the delay time between the two channels, I can really start getting some interesting stuff. Even more so if I put it on ping pong mode, which is when it's going to dance back and forth, I can get a cool rhythm and a cool space effect. And so just like that, you can take a kind of, uninspired hi-hat groove and turn it into something a lot cooler. Now if you were to manipulate the filter, then all of a sudden you get a really, really detailed rhythmic track. So Ableton's delay is extremely powerful and useful, but let's also take a look at some other delay plugins that are pretty cool. So probably the most popular delay plugin in the industry is going to be Echoboy from Sound Toys. Now this is a tad pricey, but if you have the money to spend, it's definitely worth it because you can get some really amazing effects. And it actually allows you to model, if we take a closer look, it actually allows you to model some old school styles of like tape and effects pedals and other sorts of things. So let's have a listen to this now. Now the other thing about this is that it's a little bit less confusing to look at than the Ableton Reverb because it's actually just going to give you the note values rather than in that kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 increment that Ableton does. Moreover, what it allows you to do is actually put it in a dotted note or a triplet note. Which is really useful as well. Now over here, we have multiple different echo modes. So single echo is when both channels are going to delay at the same time. And dual echo is going to be a little bit more like the Ableton delay, where we are able to change the time between both channels. And you can get some pretty awesome stuff from doing this. What's also cool about this is you can create groove in the echo. So let's listen to that. And you can even go much deeper into this if you press this tweak button. And you get some really interesting stuff like the width of the actual delay, which is very cool. And that's even something that you could automate throughout a track, especially for something like techno, to have something just kind of dancing in and out of the stereo spectrum. You also have your left-right offset, which means that you can actually have one side be a little bit off more than the other. And then you have your balance, which is going to basically determine which side you hear more. And then you have your feedback mix, where you can actually create feedback between the two channels, so that your right side is delaying from the right to the left, and also vice versa. So the next delay we'll have a look at is one from D16 Audio Group, called Repeater, which is pretty cool. So if we look here, right, we have our pretty much our basic controls. It's just laid out a little bit differently. We have our mix knob, we have our feedback, we have our delay time, and then we have a high frequency and low frequency filter, so a high pass and low pass filter. And then we have something called a color knob, which is pretty cool. What I like a lot about this delay is that you have all of these different styles that you can choose from that sound pretty different. So let's do tape delay vintage and see what that sounds like. So we unlink these two sides now, right? All of a sudden, what ends up happening is we're able to put the sound out wide. So that's one of the most useful tricks that we have for using delay, which is we can create stereo information where it's not by delaying the left and the right side. And basically the reason for that is because the human ear is kind of dumb. So it's not going to be able to actually realize that left and right are separate moments. It's going to take it all as one thing. And again, on this one, we have a ping pong mode, which is going to have them bounce back and forth. And then what's also really cool is we actually have something called analog mode, which is going to allow us to simulate an overload in the analog circuitry of a delay system. And I'll show you what that sounds like. That means once we press stop, what's actually going to happen is the delays will increase in volume, and we'll start getting that distortion. So this effect is especially useful for kind of fading into another section of a song or using it for a build-up. You can freeze and flatten the feedback information and warp it and twist it in all sorts of really cool ways. So that's a look at the basics of delay. We looked through a couple of other third-party ones that have some additional features. Again, my name is Justin Beck, and I'm an instructor here at 343 Labs. We're an electronic music school based in New York City and online. If you liked the video, click subscribe to find more just like it.